No Man's Sky Aerons, Chapter 3, by William Smith. The battle raged around her, too vast and violent for her to follow. Plasma fire cut the air in sharp staccato bursts, glowing bolts smashing into the quadruped's armor. The machine shrieked light in reply, beams searing trenches through stone, molten edges hissing in the rain. Elena crawled along the ravine floor, ribs stabbing with each move, helmet fogging with each shallow breath. She wanted to stay small, invisible. She wanted to melt into the stone. But the chaos had a gravity of its own, pulling her into its orbit. One of the warriors broke from the pack, charging in with a guttural roar that shook his chest like thunder. His armor was dented, scarred, his helm cracked at the crown. In his hands he gripped a brutal rifle, more cannon than rifle, its body smeared with soot and blood. He raised it, firing at the quadruped's joints, carving glowing holes into its plating. The machine buckled under the assault. Then the sentinel turned. A flare of red lit its maw. The hum returned, growing in pitch until it scraped Elena's skull. She screamed, but the sound drowned in the helmet. The warriors roared back, refusing to move, refusing to bow. The beam fired. It tore through him in a line of molten light. His armor glowed white-hot, then cracked. He staggered, chest smoking, and fell hard onto the stone not 10 feet from Elena. The rifle clattered from his grasp, sliding toward her in a spray of dust. Elena froze. Her breath came fast, uneven. Through the visor, she could see his face behind the cracked helm, a tangle of tusks and scars, eyes already glassing over. The smell hit her even through the suit filters, scorched flesh, charred metal. Her stomach lurched. She wanted to crawl away, close her eyes, erase the image. But her gaze snagged on the rifle lying between them. Its edges glowed faintly from overheating, barrel still spitting sparks. The machine roared again, optics sweeping for new prey. The warriors pressed harder, shouting oaths that echoed through the storm. One stumbled, nearly crushed under the quadruped's massive leg. Elena's hand moved before her mind agreed. She reached out, fingers trembling, and closed them around the multi-tool's grip. The weight shocked her. Heavier than she expected, built for a hand larger, stronger than hers. The trigger guard bit into her glove. The screen along the top spat alien glyphs she couldn't read, scrolling too fast for her eyes to follow. The sentinel turned, optics sweeping red. One of the warriors screamed in defiance. Then silence. Cut off. Mid-cry. Elena raised the rifle. It shook in her grip. Too heavy, too alien, her ribs screaming with the motion. She squeezed the trigger. The recoil jolted her wrist. A bolt of white-hot energy spat from the barrel, wild, uncontrolled. It missed its mark. At first. The beam ricocheted off stone, splashing against the quadruped's leg joint. The machine staggered. The warriors roared in triumph. One bellowed her way, voice guttural and savage, but the tone unmistakable. Encouragement. Elena stared at the rifle in her hands, chest heaving. The weapon glowed, whining with heat, but still hummed alive. She had fired it. She had struck the monster that had nearly ended her. The quadruped steadied, turning its optics toward her again. The glow in its maw flared brighter, swelling with fury. Elena braced herself, but the warriors surged in, chanting louder, slamming into its flank with renewed violence. They hacked with blades, poured fire into every glowing seam. The storm seemed to chant with them, thunder matching their rhythm. Elena clutched the rifle tighter, blood pounding in her ears, and realized she was part of the battle now, whether she wanted it or not. The shot she'd fired felt like an accident, a spasm masquerading as courage. But the result was real. The quadruped lurched, leg joint sparking, its stance thrown off by a fraction that mattered. The warriors seized it. They surged as one organism, a dark tide under stormlight. Their cries braided into a single word that struck the air like a hammer. Herc! The name rolled down the ravine walls and came back again, an echo that sounded older than the storm itself. A warrior with a horned helm sprinted low, boots skidding sparks, and slammed a broad shield into the machine's wounded leg. Metal shrieked. Another vaulted his back, blade biting at the seam Elena's ricochet had scorched. The weapon wasn't elegant, more butcher's tool than sword, but it punched through framing and carved a gutter of molten light. The quadruped screamed, no sound, only radiance, its optics flaring to a blinding bloom. A sweeping beam scythed across the ground. Stone hissed, turned glass, then ran like syrup. Two warriors dove through the glare, mantles smoking, and rolled behind boulders as the beam carved an incandescent trench where they had stood. Elena crabbed backward, dragging the heavy rifle, the world yawing with every breath. Her ribs flashed white-hot each time she moved. A warrior slid in beside her without looking, bracing a scarred rifle on the same rock. Up close he smelled of ozone and iron and something animal. He fired in controlled bursts, bolts punching neat, angry blossoms across the sentinel's plating. A smaller drone shrieked into the melee, needle sleek, its red eye hard as a jeweler's ruby. It knifed for the warrior's exposed flank. Elena didn't think. She raised the rifle, squeezed. The shot went wide, shattered an outcrop. Shards pattered off her helmet like hail. The second shot, she adjusted, clenched tighter, ignored her screaming wrist, took the drone through its eye. It popped like a bulb. The body tumbled end over end and cracked open on the stone, dark circuitry unraveling like guts. The warrior barked something that might have been approval. He slapped a fresh cell into his rifle and rose into the storm again, firing. The quadruped planted, stabilized, and lowered its head. Light gathered at its maw in a slow, deliberate spiral, tighter and hotter than before. The air around Elena wavered with heat. She felt the beam before it fired, a pressure against the front of her body, as if the world itself had drawn breath to shout. "Herc!" the warriors roared back. A trio of them charged from opposite angles, blades high, voices beating time. One hurled a cylinder that clanged against the sentinel's throat and clung there, spitting sparks. A plasma charge or its crude cousin. The machine jerked reflexively, beam veering at the last instant, searing past the charging warriors and lancing a black tree instead. The trunk flashed into a sheet of brittle glass and collapsed, exploding in a hail of shining knives. The cylinder detonated. Light slammed outward in a disk, raw and white. The sentinel's front plates bulged, then split, a jagged grin torn in metal. Liquid brilliance leaked through the crack and ran down its chest in threads, hissing where it touched the ground. They piled in, shoulder to shoulder, hacking at the opening, their voices raw with effort. One had a hook-headed tool. He jammed it into the sundered seam and wrenched, tendons cording along his forearms, lifting a slab of armor aside like a trapdoor. Underneath, a nest of moving light, filaments, veins, living circuitry that recoiled from the touch of air. Elena limped closer without meaning to, drawn by the terrible beauty of the thing. The rifle hummed angrily in her hands, barrel heat thrumming through the glove. The storm guttered overhead, green-purple clouds sucking in like lungs before a scream. The quadruped bucked. A foreleg hammered down. Rock shattered. A warrior went down with a crunch that cut short. The machine's remaining optics pulsed from red to nearly white, desperate, furious. An armored warrior was there before it recovered, smashing a studded fist into the glowing nest, burying a charge elbow deep. His suit smoked. He howled the name again, "Herc!" and drove deeper. Another beam built, thin as a needle and twice as cruel. It speared the rock beside Elena and ricocheted, grazing her shoulder. The suit screamed a warning as heat bled through. Pain snapped like a whip. She dropped to a knee, tasted metal, forced the rifle up. There, a lattice of light behind the split plates, flickering like a heartbeat. She exhaled, let her hand steady on the breath's edge, and fired. The bolt punched into the lattice and blew a fist-sized abscess in it. The sentinel convulsed. For 3 heartbeats it held together through stubbornness alone, all 4 legs dug into the earth like stakes. Then the light inside it guttered, not extinguished, but starved. The massive frames sagged, plates clanging as they fell out of true, seams opening like old wounds. The red in its optics dimmed to a sullen coal. The warriors did not hesitate. They shoved as if collapsing a wall in a siege, wedges and hooks and howls, dragging panels free, carving through whatever glowed until that glow ran thin and sickly. One warrior climbed the bowed neck, planting his boot, and drove a hammered spike straight down into the heart of the mechanism. Metal groaned. Something deep inside unclasped with the terrible softness of a final breath. The quadruped's head drooped. It knelt without grace, legs folding, huge body settling into the glass trench it had burned into the ground. The hum that had filled the air seeped away, leaving the storm's raw voice to reclaim the clearing. Those last 2 optics flickered once more, stubborn embers in a wet hearth, and went dark. Silence fell, but it wasn't quiet. The black trees sang faintly as heat left them, a sound like the chiming of 1,000 thin bells. The rivers of fire beyond kept their pulse. Thunder treaded in the distance, softer now, like a giant walking away. For a long moment no one spoke. Steam rose from armor. Blood, some of it theirs, some of it not, spattered the stone. The stink of scorched circuitry and hot iron lay over everything. Then a single, low chant began. One voice, then a second, then the rest joining. Not the battle cry, but something heavier. A name repeated, long vowels, the rhythm solemn. Elena didn't understand the words, but the shape of them told her. A fallen one was being named. The warrior she'd watched die, his rifle now hot and heavy in her hands, was carried into that sound. A helm turned toward her. The warrior behind it looked huge up close, tusks chipped, one pauldron cracked through and held together by a strap. His chest rose and fell with the slow steadiness of a man refusing pain. He glanced at the weapon clutched in her grip, at the scorch on the sentinel where her shot had landed, then back to her faceplate. Whatever he thought, his voice, when it came, was not gentle. A terse string of syllables. A question. A demand. Elena stared back, numb, breath rattling. She tried to answer and found nothing. Another warrior strode past her and drove a knife into the sentinel's ruined eye, twisting until the last spark winked. He spat on the metal and lifted his gaze to the storm, as if daring it to return the machine to life. The chant faded. The leader barked a short command. Movements resumed with purpose, scavenging plates, checking wounds, stamping out tiny fires where molten stone licked at dry ash. 2 broke away and approached Elena. They did not level weapons at her. They simply reached, iron hands, firm as clamps, and hauled her to her feet as if she weighed nothing. She swayed, the world seesawing. The rifle nearly slipped from her grasp. One of them plucked it from her, checked the charge with practiced motions, then slung it across his back. The leader spoke again, slower, eyes never leaving hers. The only word she caught, because every tongue seemed to shape it the same, was traveler. The storm muttered overhead. The dead machine steamed at her feet, a fallen altar of cold light. In the distance, high on a ridge, firelight flickered, a cluster of glow amid the black spires, like a promise or a warning. Hands urged her forward. Elena staggered with them, leaving the wreckage behind. The rivers pulsed, the mountains watched, and the war moved her along, as if she had always been part of its telling. Elena stumbled forward, boots dragging through the grit, every jolt sending new pain radiating from her ribs. The warriors flanking her hauled her upright without effort, their massive hands clamped over her forearms. She might as well have been a rag doll. The storm pressed down as they moved. Lightning cracked sideways, painting the ravine in green-violet flashes. The steaming corpse of the quadruped lay behind them, black smoke rising into the sky like an offering. Its glow had died, but Elena swore she still felt it, burned into her retinas. Her helmet's filters hissed. Her oxygen gauge blinked low. She tried to twist toward the aliens holding her, tried to gesture at the canister clipped to her belt, but they ignored her. Their focus stayed forward, scanning the trees, the ridges, the shadows. They were huge up close, their armor scarred and mismatched, patched with slabs of stone or bone. Their helms turned them into snarling beasts, tusks, horns, jagged crests. Through the cracks she glimpsed eyes that glowed faintly in the stormlight. Not human, not merciful. One barked something guttural over his shoulder. The others responded with a single sharp word, like soldiers answering a command. Their voices blended with the thunder until she couldn't tell which shook her more. They moved with relentless speed, boots crunching black stone, ducking under jagged trunks of obsidian. Elena tripped more than once, catching her toe on glassy shards. Each time, the warriors yanked her back to her feet without slowing. Her chest burned. Her breaths came shallow, ragged, fogging the visor. She tried to speak, to plead, to ask, but her voice cracked against the helmet's calm, thin and useless. "Where are you taking me?" The storm began to thin. The clouds still boiled overhead, but breaks appeared, showing stars that twisted into unfamiliar constellations. Between them hung something vast, a gas giant maybe, its swollen bulk painted with red bands, filling half the sky. For a heartbeat, Elena forgot the pain. She had studied planetary images her whole life, but never like this. Seeing it naked above her, colossal and alive, it felt less like astronomy and more like standing before a god. The warriors did not look up. They crested a ridge, boots grinding stone, and Elena saw firelight below. A cluster of structures huddled in the valley, crude but solid, walls of stone and scavenged plating, roofs stitched with hides that flapped in the storm wind. Fires burned in iron pits, their smoke dragged sideways by the gale. The settlement glowed like a scar in the black forest, warm against the cold obsidian, alive against the dead spires. Voices rose from within. Harsh syllables carried on the wind, rhythmic, communal, like a chant broken by laughter. The sight hit her like another impact. These weren't just warriors. This was a people. The squad dragging her broke into calls, low and guttural, signaling their return. Shapes stirred below. More figures emerged from the structures, armed and armored, eyes catching the firelight. Children, or at least smaller ones, darted among them, curiosity in their movements. Elena's knees gave. The warriors held her up, but she sagged between them, vision swimming. Every bruise screamed. Her ribs felt like cracked glass grinding inside her. The multi-tool she'd fired had been taken, slung across a warrior's back. She was unarmed, half-conscious, a stranger among giants. The group passed through a gate made of lashed timbers and metal scraps. Inside, the air was thicker with smoke and the iron tang of blood. Fires cast everything in orange and red, shadows tall against the walls. The settlement's inhabitants gathered, muttering in their guttural language, eyes fixed on her. Their gazes were not soft. Some curious, some wary, some openly hostile. She caught the glint of tusks, the gleam of scarred armor, the flash of bone trophies dangling from belts. Her captors halted in the central square. One barked an announcement, voice carrying above the storm. The crowd answered with a rumble that might have been approval or suspicion. Elena swayed on her feet, heart pounding. Then one of them stepped forward, taller than the rest, his armor more elaborate, horns curling from his helm. He carried himself with the calm weight of command. His eyes glowed brighter, sharp, and unyielding, locking onto her like a predator assessing prey. He studied her for a long, heavy moment. Then he spoke. The words were thick, alien, but one cut through. Traveler. The syllables hung in the smoke. The crowd murmured, shifting, their attention sharpening. The word had weight. Elena's chest clenched. She wanted to demand what it meant, to shout that she wasn't whoever they thought she was, but her throat only rasped. She swayed again, and this time the darkness pulled harder. The last thing she saw before her knees buckled was the leader's glowing eyes, steady as stars, watching her fall.